Hey, welcome back to another episode of Three Men and a Platform. This week we're going to be talking about COVID and, is it real? Is it not? Some of the data behind it. We're going to be talking about capitalism, the tyranny of, and started off by a bit of a round robin, some hot topics, some memes, just random things that we all thought were interesting and worth talking about. Before we get started, just wanted to throw out there, if you like what we're doing, like, subscribe, go to our social media pages. There should be links down below. And more than anything, give us some comments and some feedback. Let us know what you'd like to see, like us to talk about, like us to do better. With all that said, let's kick it off. I'll start it off with an interesting on-topic meme that I found here. See if I can scroll this a little bit better. If you can't read it, it says Corona.
Hey, how come all your stuff is aimed right at me? Come on, what's going on here?
So, I was thinking about that when I found this one. I was like, man, a majority of my memes last week were kind of targeted. I think it's because most of the topics on like Reddit's a very left, driven community, and so
yes.
And so most of the stuff posted on there, I think, leans that way, and there's a higher quantity of those things.
Yeah.
But this one I couldn't pass up, even though I just was trying to not be too biased there. So it says Corona death is 1.3%. That's not a lot. And the other button says mail-in voter fraud is 0.0025%. That's a lot. So for those of you that don't keep up with some of these things, it's been the contention that coronavirus, from the right, from Donald Trump, I guess, that coronavirus isn't that deadly, that it's just going to go away. We don't have to worry about it, et cetera, et cetera. I'm sure you've heard those stories. And the other side of it is, the right is saying that mail-in voting is going to drive a lot of corruption in this upcoming election, and that it's not very safe, and that there's
going to be massive voter fraud.
There's going to be a lot of voter fraud, that it opens up the doorway for a lot of voter fraud. And historically, there has not been hardly any voter fraud at all. And just a little piece of data there: about 25% of the votes in the 2016 presidential election were mail-in. So, a little piece of knowledge. So anyway. Since it's targeted at you, Nathan, I'll go to you. What are your thoughts on this one?
Well, I personally have seen, as you know, politics are a team sport, so I'm inclined to believe, and in my communities, I hear lots of stories about voter fraud. So voter fraud does happen, but I will concede that it hasn't been demonstrated on the level that is being claimed by the federal government. Now, from what I've heard, President Trump put together a commission to try to study voter fraud in the 2016 election, but 45 states had denied data that he was asking for, so the committee couldn't get anywhere on that. So it's like, it hasn't been demonstrated. It's possible that it happens. It's a guarantee that it happens to some degree, but I mean, the results are probably negligible. But the thing that I would be concerned about this, I know we're not trying to get too deep on this, but the thing that I am concerned about this is that it does undermine the faith in the election, right? So switching the mailing system over to switching the voting system over to mailing, 6 months before an election, or even coming up on the election here, I mean, it's not a good way to inspire faith in the system.
To that point, though, is it the switching of the voting system that is taking away the validity of the system, or is it the politicization? Oh man, I have to be able to say that, huh? You know what I'm trying to say? Of this change that is driving that, right? I mean, if it was just if the news had just come out and it was, hey, every state's going to allow mail-in voting because of COVID, and that was the end of the news cycle on it, do you think it would have had the same impact of taking away people's, trust?
Okay, well, so keep in mind both sides politicized it. So it
100%, yes.
Right.
Yes.
So it in itself is a political act, right? So it's pushed because the Democrats want to push it, right? And then it's pushed back on because the Republicans don't like it, right? So it's just at the very top levels, it's the Republican think tank saying, "Oh, this is going to negatively affect us. The Democrats are doing this on purpose," and then it's Democrats saying, "Oh, this will help us."
Right. But so I understand that the politicization was from both sides. My question is, though, to your point. Your point sounded like you were saying changing something this close to the election isn't good, is kind of where you were going. And so my question is, do you think that it's changing so close to an election, or do you think that it is how the media and everyone is reacting to the change that's causing the distrust?
I also just want to say I would disagree that this is happening close to the election. We've had many months for every state to prepare to develop like their infrastructure for mail-in voting. If they don't already have it, some states vote almost over majority as mail-in ballots already. So it's just kind of it'd be a really poor excuse if Trump loses the election and we blame like election infrastructure, because every state has had ample time to prepare. This is not like day of changes.
Yeah, there's something also to think about, and man, we're really drilling down on this first meme, but there's another issue that the dynamic of election day might change with this massive shift, right? So it looks like most of the Trump votes are going to be cast in person, so it's going to look like on election night, it's going to look like Donald Trump wins in a landslide. And this is conjecture, obviously, but this is a possibility that it looks like Trump wins in a landslide. But then as the mail-in votes keep rolling in, it starts shifting towards Biden, and then like eventually Biden wins in a landslide. And then, the Republicans are not gonna believe that, right? There's a lot of people who are pretty conspiracy theory minded, and the fact that all of these mail-in vote ballots, tend to point towards Biden it's gonna cause a lot of unrest. I don't think Republicans are gonna riot, but I mean they're not gonna be happy. Like very unhappy, like as unhappy as the Democrats are right now.
We're going to see Charlottesville times 30, just full blown, just like riots.
Yeah, it's going to be crazy.
All right, let's go on to the next one. So we got our bang for our buck on that one. So I've got so I have an article here. So Briana Taylor. So Briana Taylor was a paramedic who, I believe an EMT who was shot and killed in a no-knock police raid. How long ago was it? 6 months or so? It was a while ago, March 13th. And this preceded the death of George Floyd, but it was one of the catalysts that's led to the current wave of Black Lives Matter protests across the country. And so the story today is that, and I would love to show you the title. There it is. Louisville agrees to pay Briana Taylor's family $12 million and enact police reforms in historic settlement. So I just, I thought I wanted our viewers to see that, sometimes things do change, and this could be an olive branch to the protesters. Maybe you could assume that this came through protest. So let's see. So I'm gonna give Chris the floor in a second, but let's see. So yeah, I saw. Okay, so Mayor Fisher said the city is not admitting wrongdoing in the agreement. Right. So there's a settlement, $12 million. It's a lot of money. It's the largest settlement that the city's ever given out in a wrongful death suit. And yet the city is not admitting to culpability. What do you think about that, Chris?
Oh. I meant to hit on mute and I hit on video, so that wasn't going to help anybody. So I just skimmed the article, the New York Times one, on my phone, and so I think it's wonderful they're paying out, and it also looks like, so it's kind of funny because they're almost, just from what I skimmed, they're almost all but admitting culpability. They're going to be doing police reform. They're going to be doing like they're reforming, and they've done a payout, but they're saying we're not admitting culpability. It's like, it seemed, he literally said, like, the police chief, like, he's like, why wait for reform? Let's do it now. And it's like, so just admit culpability. So I feel as if it's probably a legalese thing where they don't want to avoid further action. Right. They don't want to avoid further lawsuits. But at the end of the day, I think what a lot of people on the right don't realize, and a lot of police officers don't realize, is 80% of what we want is just for the police to come out and unanimously say, we're sorry, we fucked up, we're going to do better. Not that we're going to do better, but we didn't do anything wrong in the first place. It's like, no, we fucked up.
Yeah, but I disagree with that. I disagree with that because at the beginning of the Black Lives Matter protests, I mean, departments across the country were taking a knee with the protesters, and it didn't calm it down by any measure.
I agree. Well, I mean, it did for the people that. Well, most of the protests weren't violent. Only like 3% of them were. So
I heard 9%.
What was that?
I heard 9%.
So let's just say 3 to 9% of protests received some level of violence, but maybe 3% reached riot level. I think it's important to acknowledge that the reality is that a lot of well-minded people, such as myself, really just wanted police, to take a knee. That meant a lot to everybody on this side of the aisle, and it meant a lot, I hope, to the country. And so that's all we want. I mean, we want reform, right? It's not all we want, but a huge part is just like if these police departments, like in this one, if they just said we messed up and we're going to do so, just saying reform doesn't really get at everything we want.
Yeah, fair enough. I guess we no need to go any further on that.
It really comes in. If I can say one more quick thing. It really comes into this notion of like true transitional justice. It's like to truly allow for justice to happen at a cultural societal level, we need to own up to past mistakes, and that has a larger power than people realize. Like, it's not just symbolic; it's culture changes.
Can you talk about transitional justice for our audience?
Sure. So transitional justice is typically more of a term in like war-torn countries, but you can apply it to the United States to various degrees. Basically, what it is that when you have mass disservice or mass infringement on civil rights, such as a genocide or through segregation, what you can't arrest everybody. You can't prosecute everybody. It destroys the economy. It's not feasible. You can't logistically arrest everybody because eventually you're just going to be arresting innocent people. So to transition, instead of like going through court proceedings, you do a culture reform. You say, okay, let's all collectively as a society say, let's do better tomorrow than we did today. And let's own up to the mistakes that we've made. And to be honest, it actually kind of works. Look at Germany, post-World War II Germany. They're a perfect example. I would say we are not a perfect example of transitional justice in the full extent, but we've done a lot of things that have helped when we're talking about civil rights to move the needle forward. We all grew up knowing the KKK was awful. I'm sure that wasn't the case in the 40s and 50s, right?
I disagree. I'm sure a very, very large portion of the country understood that the KKK was not a good organization.
Maybe in our part of the country.
Yeah, it was largely a North-South thing. But, I mean, there was plenty of black people in the South, too. I'm pretty sure they didn't like the KKK.
I'm sure they didn't. But, yeah, I hope that answers.
One comment on this article, or more, I guess, on the statement you made. You asked, and I took your question to be to Chris, what his thought was on them not admitting culpability or liability. I don't actually think that's a big point. In any settlement case, in the private world as well, in the legal world, the entire purpose of settling out of court is so that there is no defined culpability or anything like that. So, and they always say that they don't want it to be public. They don't want to take responsibility on paper like that. So
to be fair to Chris, I mean, back when Jussie Smollett was having his hoax, I was mad when he was allowed off the hook and he didn't admit culpability. So I'll try to be consistent there. I think when you are in the wrong, culpability should be, either announced or assumed through a court case. But I mean, this thing still is in litigation. There still is a grand jury out there trying to figure out exactly what went wrong, and they're reviewing the evidence. And so, I mean,
I'm in agreement with you. I think that I would prefer that there was always the black and white, cut and dry, right and wrong. But I think in this particular case of that, it wasn't said that way. That to me isn't something to stick on just because it's not a new precedent that's being set. It's something that's common.
Yeah, fair enough.
Chris, you got some fun top topics, or?
I do. I have a good meme. I have a couple.
All right, meme it up.
Let me pull this up. Give me 1 second.
While you're pulling it up, we had a comment on the mail-in ballot cut things we were doing. It says, This is from Adele, I think it's how it's pronounced. It says, normally mail-in voters request an absentee ballot. What Republicans are upset about is sending out ballots to people who don't request them. And yeah, I think that's true. That is what the big argument's about.
Right, and the distinction there is that can be messed up a lot more than people specifically asking for the ballot and telling you where to send it.
Sure, but the people that don't ask for it are less likely to be the ones planning on doing voter fraud. Just a sidebar. But anyway.
But that's not really the issue.
Chris, you're up.
I love it. All right, what do you got?
So it's Homer Simpson, or Lisa saying, like, look, what is it? You gotta learn to trust your government. And then Homer Simpson is like picking up the lamp and saying, that's what I do. Basically, like the mass surveillance of like having Siris and all that in our houses.
Oh, jeez. I just got that now, and I'm the guy that had Big Brother star behind me for the second and third podcasts. That's hilarious.
It's a good one.
Tell me, Chris, do you trust the government? You have a hammer and sickle right behind you. I hope you trust the government.
I trust the government.
I trust the government of the Soviet Union of Russia.
Look, I think this meme is stupid. Obviously, the government's spy technology is good enough that you don't have to pick the fucking lamp up and talk. This is ridiculous.
On that note, we're making it incredibly easy for them.
Yeah. Could you imagine? Like, it probably came in all like, when you blast the speaker way loud and it shows like, that's what I do. Like, it probably.
Oh, dear God, this guy.
A Whopper with cheese. Yeah.
Oh, jeez. All right, what else, Tim? What's your turn? What you got?
My next one is also
there, Chris.
My meme is also on topic for one of our daily topics here. So for those of you who haven't heard, Bob Woodward released some audio recordings of him and Trump, where Trump is talking about downplaying the coronavirus and doing it on purpose. I don't think that's a real big shock to most people, but a lot of news has been made of it, and I thought it was an interesting post when I saw this, that how hard some of the right news had been pushing on how bad China has been about lying about how bad the virus was early in the beginning and downplaying it. So kind of the hypocrisy there. Thoughts?
Oh boy, Chris, do you want this, or are you still struggling with that flag? That flag just took over my face. The Soviet Union came back, guys.
Can you drag it down on the list? You put it behind your element.
Yeah, I'll take care of it. Don't worry.
You can keep your camera up, man. People don't mind if you struggle.
No, I mind. The Soviet Union can't be
okay, so I can take this meme or this. I guess it is a meme kind of.
It's kind of a meme, yeah.
Okay, so look. So it's two different things. So Trump, obviously, and he will tell you that when he downplayed it, the purpose was to reduce the panic, right? So he was trying to allay a panic, right? And I can only say that so many different ways, but I believe he's come out and said that. So what Tucker is saying is
he actually said that to Woodward, just to be transparent on that, right? He has a recording where he says to Woodward that he was downplaying it to
prevent the panic.
Prevent a panic, yeah.
Which, is obvious to anybody who likes Trump, and then is fodder for anybody who doesn't like him. But anyway, so you have that on the one hand, right? And then on the other hand, you have a clip of Tucker talking about China has lied about the virus from the beginning, which China did, right? So not only did China not let the world know that there was a pandemic spreading in Wuhan, it shut down travel, I believe, right? Fact check me on this, please. It shut down travel inter-country with Wuhan before it shut down travel out of the country from Wuhan, right? So airports in Wuhan were still flying out of the country when Wuhan was quarantined from the rest of the country, number one. Number two, they didn't give us the genetic analysis of the coronavirus until about 3 weeks after they had it, right? They held that information back, which was critical in the development of vaccine. right? And then, number 3, they withheld the information that it was spread human to human, again, weeks after they knew it, right?
Yeah, I'm sorry. It's a bit of a cop-out, dude. It's like we already knew this. We already knew the problems with China. This is not anything new to me. And the whole world has gone against, has tackled that, and they've addressed that. And I'm sure China will be punished for this once the dust is settled. But the reality is the president had the opportunity to really inform the general public, and his supporters take his word like it's the word of God, dude. And so he is responsible for the death of some of his supporters by not.
How many would you say? Just put an estimate on it.
Hey, you muted yourself, Chris.
Damn it. If Trump came out and he said, listen, guys, this is serious. I realize you're going to hear some crazy news. But please take this seriously. Wear a mask. I don't care what you got to do. Put a sock on your mouth. Like, wear a mask. He can be as goofy.
Hold on. The CDC initially came out and said it's not good to wear a mask.
I believe they came out and said if you are not a first responder, then don't go out and buy masks.
That's not what they said initially. Initially, the CDC said, do not wear a mask. It will not help. That's what they said.
Damn, you were ready for me to call it Trump on the mask thing. No, I mean, it's one of those things where, one, we have to accept the fact and give everybody the benefit of the doubt, in the sense that early on, we knew that information was changing by the day because we just didn't have enough information out about it. Now we know masks genuinely do help prevent the transmission. However, with that being said, Trump should not have been downplaying this. Like, explicitly, he knew it was serious at points, and he still downplayed it.
Yeah, well, we can talk in more detail on this type of topic when we get into our coronavirus topic.
Oh, that's right. We are talking about coronavirus tonight. As a matter of fact, we're coming up on that in a couple of minutes here.
So, just a primer. You can take it away, Nate.
Okay. All right. So I have one more, and we have a couple minutes to talk about this.
Before you take it, Adele also had a comment. She said his actions didn't downplay it. I'm not sure what that means. I'll have to ask her.
We can argue that. No, I mean, we could argue that, and Chris could probably have some good points on what his actions were. And then I would come back on, well, most of that was misrepresented as usual, but we're moving on. So,
hold on to the whole debate.
Yeah, exactly. All right, so this is another thing. So, we only have so much time in the beginning of this to go through news and what's relevant. So, I'm trying to keep all these the most important stories in my mind for the beginning of the podcast. But this is a pretty relevant story because, especially on the right, and I think everybody can acknowledge that the heat in the country is going way, way up, and that there's a spate of anti-cop rhetoric in the country right now. This is almost entirely being driven by the left, and my characterization would be that for the most part, for a large part, the rhetoric is irresponsible and can lead to incidents like this. So what I have here is an article. This is from BBC.com, but I mean, everybody has a pretty standard write-up on this. It's titled, Los Angeles Police Officers Shot in Ambush, right? Ambush in scare quotes. I don't know why it's an ambush. So I'll read a little bit of this. So 2 Los Angeles police officers are recovering in hospital after being shot in what police are calling an ambush. Video of the incident shows a figure approaching the officer's vehicle before opening fire and running away. Los Angeles Sheriff Alex Villanova called the act cowardly. The suspect remains at large, and there's a $100,000 bounty on his head. So, I mean, Chris, I kind of wanted, it's not necessarily fair for me to take this at you because you're not the most egregious, but you are sort of token leftist. So what do you think the relationship is between rhetoric, and this is a philosophical question in general. You can ask this of anybody. You can ask me about the immigrant rhetoric, and like whether there's going to be immigrant violence. So do you think anti-cop rhetoric? No, I won't even be that specific. Do you think the rhetoric on the left, the general discourse on the left, contributed to this happening? And what do you think about that?
On the cop assassination?
Yes.
No, I don't. I don't. And maybe that's me being protective of this side of the political spectrum. But
you mean at all? Like if you had to put like a percentage on it, like like, let's say none of the defund the police, none of the all cops are bastards, none of the pigs in a blanket, let them fry. If none of that was out there, you think this would have happened?
No, probably not. I'm sure this person was radicalized, right? Like this is an example of radicalization. And those perceptions are not coming from the left. Those are coming from and maybe this is again protecting myself, but the far extremist left. Those are coming from the people who would actually rock the hammer and sickle, right? These are people who are way more extremist. All reasonable people, are not out here saying let's kill police, right? Nobody wants to kill police except radicalized extremists that probably went down their own version of a 4chan channel and ended up doing this. It's awful. I'm not happy with that. That's pretty messed up.
Right, obviously. And that's why I started to say it was unfair, but I mean, you're the one to ask the question too.
And I'm sure I haven't looked into this, but all major Democratic individuals or leaders, I'm sure, would be denouncing this or are denouncing this.
I know Joe Biden did, at least.
Yeah. So no one wants police killed, right? We just want police training and accountability. That's what we're asking for.
Right. Well, Tim, what do you think? The relationship between rhetoric and violence? I mean, it's a very, very difficult question.
Yeah, I think there's some part of it that is true, that there is a relationship. How much, and I don't know the details of the story, so I can't comment on it. I can tell you one thing that this kind of made me think about that I absolutely hate, and it is becoming so commonplace today, from the left, from the right, from every angle that you look at, is the radicals are being the ones used to define what the other side thinks the normal is. Right. Yeah. So radical right people are, what the left media is saying, these are Republicans, and radical left are what the right media is using and saying these are what Democrats are, when in reality, exactly what Chris was saying, most of us fit somewhere near the middle, and we may disagree on some topics and some policies and all that, but for the most part, we all agree on the goal, right? We all want to do better for our society. We want to do better for our children. We want more opportunity, and we disagree on how to get there. People that are in these types of situations that are this radicalized, they don't even agree on necessarily exactly what we're trying to do, which is to improve society. So
true. So let me. So I mean, I agree with a lot of that, but I also would push back in the notion that I think the right is very good at drawing boxes around things, right? We're the borders people. We're the there's two genders. We put boxes around things. We're really good at that. So it frustrates us to no end when people lump Nazis in with us, right? They say, okay, the Nazis are right. But everybody on the right, like all the Republicans, we have a box around them, and we're like, no, those are Nazis. Those are not us. Like, we can do that, and we know exactly why we're not Nazis, and we know why they're not us. I don't think the same is true for the left.
I disagree. I disagree because, I think we both have to be conscious and think it's safe to say that our values, we are not culpable for extremists taking advantage of our beliefs, right? Like, you saying that we shouldn't have open borders does not constitute into hunting undocumented people crossing the border, right? That's an extremist view. With that being said, look at this QAnon stuff or whatever you say at Quanon.
I have to look into that. I actually don't know much about that.
Trump literally openly said, I don't know much about it. Maybe it's good. And then he had said it again. He's like, I looked into it, whatever. Like we literally have, and then there's congressional Republicans endorsed running for office right now. There's members of the Republican Party running for congressional seats endorsed by their state's political party. I'll pull it up later and I'll send you the links. Running for office under the political party, and they're supporters of Quanon, or however you say it, like
quinoa.
Yeah, I think quinoa.
Of quinoa with the silent N. Like, we just want Trump to tell people to F off. That's really 80% of what the left generally wants. Is can you just tell your crazy supporters to 100% F off, not just
Look, all right. So I gotta say, so now I'm gonna fully backpedal and just 100% agree with Tim. No, so I'm not gonna backpedal. I still think there's a problem that the left has with defining the radicals, but we can talk about that in a later podcast. But what Tim said, there's a reality to it. Like all of us, like I live in the right sphere. I listen to Ben Shapiro all day long. I'll pull up a Fox News article now and then. Like we put our face right in the shit. Like we know what they're doing to us. We know that they're propagandizing us, but we just can't. We keep coming back for more. So like. And I think the three of us are probably better than most people because, I watch leftists. I'm sure Chris is more aware than the average lefty of the right stuff. So, but like the average person, like we see the worst of everything and we just can't stop watching it. So there is some truth to that.
Yeah. So I've got one more. Oh, no, Chris, you're up.
No, we're out of time. We're going to do a half-hour segment.
I'll save it to next week. I'll save it for next week. It's a good
so
one.
This one is a coronavirus starter. So I'll start on that topic and I'll start off with this meme, but we don't have to talk about it. It's kind of just an information point. So this one is a meme, but you can't read the bottom. But the bottom of it says Turning Point USA co-founder dies of coronavirus-related complications. I actually read the article just to make sure that it wasn't like super misleading and that he just died of pneumonia but didn't actually have coronavirus or something like that. So he did indeed have coronavirus and died from the complications that it caused in his body. But I thought it was kind of an interesting way to start this conversation. In that, somebody that is a founder of a movement and a news site, and actually this meme was from that group, Turning Point USA, kind of hoaxifying the coronavirus or playing it down, ended up passing away from it, which is not funny at all. I think anyone passing away or getting sick is terrible. So I'm not joking about that, but the point of it is that it is real. How real is it, right, is kind of what I want to talk about today.
We just lost half our fans. Why would you say it's real? No, I'm kidding.
It is real. It is out there. How real is it? How dangerous is it? Is it worse than the flu? Is it not worse than the flu? Is it being played up? Do masks work? There's so many questions and so much false information out there. And hopefully, none of us have really fallen for the false information. But, the fact is that it's out there and it's real, and it is killing people. I think I want to kind of let you guys talk about this a little bit, and then come in afterwards and kind of say, yeah, that's true, that data is right, and it's interesting how you interpreted it, or vice versa. No, that's not true, or you interpreted it the wrong way, kind of thing. But one comment I'd like to start off with is just my point of view on really the hot topic in the media right now. And, that is the left wants to say, and I've seen it on article after article, they're like, Trump is responsible for nearly 200,000 deaths or something like that. And to me, that's bullshit. He is not responsible for everybody that got coronavirus. There's absolutely no way that is true.
Right.
Do I think he has some responsibility? Yeah, I do, and we can talk about that going forward, but it's definitely not everybody, right? The virus would have gotten here no matter what policies he enacted, how fast he did something, short of locking down day one and not letting anybody out of the house.
I read an article that it was here around Christmas time, actually. So yeah. I read an article a long time ago that it was like early January that it got here, and then just recently I read an article that said it was probably here around Christmas time.
It probably was. It definitely got here sometime end of December, January-ish. But that's not the major point, I think. But we can talk more about it as we go. I'd like to kind of let you guys run with it for a minute.
I'll say, I don't wish death on anybody. So I generally am sad to hear that this person, even though I'm sure we would have the most heated cup of coffee if we ever sat down and had I'm sure there'd be nothing we'd agree on. But I will say, I don't want anyone to die. I will acknowledge there is a level of irony in the most depressing way possible that if that meme's coming from their page and they've been, and I follow some of the stuff on Turning Point, and I have to say that is probably the most like puke-worthy conservative stuff I read. it bothers me to know that these people probably have been touting like anti-mask stuff, or I don't know. And Nathan, feel free to correct me if I'm wrong on that. Have they been pro anti-mask? Because if so, like really messed up, depressing irony.
So the right. So I'm okay. So I have a strong inclination to downplay how much anti-maskness has been on the right, and I actually don't know how much has been on the right. I think every instance of right-wing anti-maskness has been seen by you. To say there's not that much, but you've just seen every instance of it. I really don't. So, I mean, you could take this all the way back to the beginning, where people originally thought that Trump was saying that this was a hoax, right? And then, well, he didn't actually say that. He said that the Democrats' portrayal of his response to it was a hoax. Then there was the thing with him not wearing the masks. I understand the criticisms against that, right? Especially since I believe the president should be a leader, which is why I have such a hard time with him all the time. But he didn't wear a mask because he was tested daily, right? And everybody who came in contact with him was also tested, right? So he didn't actually need to, right? And so that's another instance.
Symbol, though,
no, I understand. Look, yes, I get it, right? So 100 points to you. I agree with you. The president should be a leader. Right, and I hope if Sleepy Joe Biden gets in, he's a leader, and I hope Trump, becomes a leader in the last 4 years of his presidency. But yes, it seems the anti-maskers are generally on the right. It is often couched in a liberty argument, right? It's this is my risk to take. You don't have any right to tell me otherwise. Most of the time I disagree with them because it's them trying to get into a store. The store is usually a private business. The private business has a right to tell you to do whatever the heck they want.
Also, it's kind of how messed up is that too? Because it's like this is not libertarianism. It's their decision is impacting people around them. If you decided to come over my house and maybe you had COVID, I mean, we've relatively social distance around each other, but let's just say I want people to wear masks in my house. Yes, I can kick them out, or let's freeze for a second. Let's say I'm walking around West Hartford Center in the public, where West Hartford Center outdoors. For those of you who are not,
is that a cough?
COVID.
What? Did you just cough?
Oh, I did. Yeah,
I gotta go. I gotta go. I'm out.
Sure.
I gotta go.
Oh shit, Nathan, you gave me COVID through the video chat. But no, let's say I'm walking around West Hartford Center, and where you do not need to technically by law, as of maybe now it's changed, but you didn't need to wear a mask. You're endangering everybody around you by not doing it. It's not about yourself. It's about the people near you.
Right. Okay. So, but let me. So, Tim and I had this conversation too. So, I admit, I agree. Coronavirus is, at least at the beginning of the pandemic and probably currently, several times deadlier than the flu. Yes, several times deadlier than the flu. I'm good with that. But at the same time, do you moralize people spreading the flu the same way? Okay, fine. If somebody spreads it by accident, fine, whatever. But people, you don't put the same moral.
It's way deadlier. It's way deadlier. It's
maybe 10 times deadlier, and to a specific subset of the population. So if somebody is walking around without, if a 20-year-old goes to a party and then doesn't see his grandpa, I'm okay with it. I'm 100% okay with it.
I think just that it affects one subset of the population more than the others doesn't make it any less deadly.
Well, it literally does. So, the median age of people who have died from the coronavirus is 80. Right.
I don't want 80-year-olds dying.
No. I'm not. God, I'm not saying kill all the 80-year-olds. I'm saying if a 20-year-old goes to a rager and then doesn't go see his grandparents or any old people, and then wears a mask around old people if he has to come in contact with them, I'm okay with that. That should be allowed.
But it's still significantly higher of a death rate for young people than it is than the flu, and that's why it becomes a level of
That's absolutely not true.
Absolutely true.
For kids, it is more deadly to get the flu than it is coronavirus.
I gotta check these figures out on that. But
Tim, did we bring these stats up? I think
I don't have them, but while you guys talk,
can you grab those ones? Yeah. There should be a chart that has mortality rates.
It comes down to this. Then, if it's taking the privilege of defending this point that I made, let's just say, for instance, it isn't, but it is way deadlier for older populations. there's plenty of parents that are 40 to 80, right? Like grandparents with their kids. Like this is not an uncommon thing. You have multi-generational households. How do you just make your kids not see family members when they're living in the same house? Like it's bound to happen. We're going to have, it may not happen to you or me, but it's people's
right. Okay. So, but that's where the American in me comes out. This is an individual problem. If you have to come in contact regularly with old people, it's up to you to wear that mask. It's up to each person to be responsible.
No,
oh yeah, am I?
No, there's no way.
Who's wrong?
You are.
No, I'm not.
Okay, you just told me to pull the data up, so I pulled the data up. Alrighty. All right, let me scroll. So left is flu, right is COVID. Death rates by age group. So if you unfortunately, I kind of wish they would have normalized the left data so that you could see the difference in the graph.
Trying to make a
curve.
Point.
Yeah, I get what they're trying to do here.
The point is not the upswing. The point is the
right. I mean, but the flu is 80 according to this data, which is probably truncated in the percentage numbers, so it's not super accurate because the numbers are so low and they truncated it to only 2 digits. But according to this data, it's showing that the flu is 83 times more deadly for old people than it is for newborns, and COVID is not 83 times more deadly for 85 plus than it is for newborns, according to this data. Right? It's 15 times more deadly.
I think too, we get in this like really ugly talk where I feel like, Nathan, maybe you're not going to say this, but a lot of other conservatives follow up on this point where it's like, okay, well, those who are dying have a pre-existing condition. It's like, well, shit, do we just want to kill everybody with like weak immune systems then? Like I have a weak immune system. I'm a marathon runner. I'm a healthy dude. But if I got COVID, I'd be pretty debilitated from it.
No, I don't. I think that's a misread of the intentions of conservatives. Frankly, I mean,
I hear it so often. It's at least.
What do you hear it in? What's the context of where you hear it? Because that is true. It's young people. So people my age without pre-existing conditions just virtually don't die from COVID.
Yeah,
it just doesn't happen. Oh, virtually
with pre-existing conditions. Not even things that like are.
How old are you, man?
28. I have to ask Wednesday. I'm kidding. I'm 28.
Okay, so it's a 0.1% death rate for your age group,
which is the flu,
from COVID,
and that's with people with pre-existing conditions. So
that is higher than the flu for 64-year-olds and younger.
Okay, I already acknowledged that it's more deadly. So one, I will. Once again, I acknowledge that it is more deadly. And then I'm going to get back to Chris's pre-existing conditions thing. And then number 3, I saw different data. You're just going to have to trust me on this. Maybe I'll bring it up in the future, but I did see different data.
I believe that you did. And I haven't vetted the source. This was the first one I pulled up. Business
Insider's usually pretty good.
Yeah, I was going to say Business Insider I haven't found to be too crazy.
Yeah.
So I don't think that it's I don't 100% trust it, but I don't have any reason to doubt it at this point. So, and again, that data is from June as well, so numbers could have changed a little bit. I don't know if what they're basing this off of, like if this is death rate by case. So is it these are the number of positive cases we had, and this is how many died? Because that skews the data.
Right. Yeah.
So there's a lot of things to take into account when you look at something like this. You can't just look at the data and not think about it.
Right.
But based on the data I have seen in kind of compiling it in my head, I haven't actually broken it out like this before. I do think that across the board, COVID is significantly more deadly than the flu. Stating that as a fact is one thing, but then deciding what is the appropriate reaction to it, what steps need to be taken because of that is then another discussion, right?
Right. Yes.
So, yeah.
Chris, I'm curious about, so to get back to what you were saying about the pre-existing conditions, like where do you, what's the context for where you hear that? What are conservatives trying to explain when they say that?
I usually feel like it's I usually feel it's chalked up in or it's accompanying the conversation on like promoting this idea of herd immunity.
How so? That still doesn't make any sense to me.
Where it's like it's only herd immunity is good because it's only killing people with pre-existing conditions.
No, that's that. But I mean, like, I don't know if you've been talking to.
If that's not what it's meant to be.
It's not. Like, so I don't, unless you've been talking to assholes, that's not what it's meant to be. I mean, usually that's just a point, and that is a correct point, that it's more deadly to people with pre-existing conditions. So the point might be there if I could try to figure out what they're trying to say. Once again, I'm putting myself out there because I don't know the original context in which you heard it, but the person might be trying to say that me as a person without a pre-existing condition, as long as I'm careful, like, so I can go, I don't have pre-existing conditions. My argument would be that I can go to a rave. You should not give a damn if I go to a rave, as long as I am careful around other people, right? Because I wear masks out when I go shopping. I'm careful around old people. I haven't visited my grandpa more than I can help, right? And I try to stay away from him when I do, right? So if that would be the only context maybe that I would bring that up, right? So to point out that it's, to me, that it is essentially the flu because I don't have a pre-existing condition.
Yeah.
I understand the externality. Look, I get it. I know there's externalities. The actual, I don't know what the conservative position, because this is supposed to be like a left-right thing, but I mean, I listen to Ben Shapiro all the time. His thing is wear a mask, social distance, wait for the vaccine to come out. Like he's saying the exact stuff that you would want to be said. So as far as the left-right thing goes, no, Ben Shapiro. I think I said that right.
Ben Shapiro. Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, the right is certainly not a monolith of anti-science, not by any stretch of the imagination, right? I know that's the. I think it's really just like the dumb people in one party are anti-science, and the dumb people in the other party are anti-science, and that's probably how it is. That's my guess, but that's a whole other topic, right? You know, we could definitely drill down on that a little bit.
Did you just call the president dumb?
I did no such thing. That guy's probably pretty
Trump
smart.
Trump is very much anti-science.
You say Trump is pretty smart?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that could be an interesting 5-minute discussion that you get stomped on.
Yeah, I think he's a pretty smart dude. Yeah, he's pretty articulate for like a 70-whatever-year-old.
There's no way, dude. Watch any Trump speed.
He's not articulate, and
would you like to contrast that with Biden?
Speaking of herd immunity, didn't Trump recently say that herd mentality was going to be the saving grace? Oh my
God! Okay, so if people didn't see it, so Trump did a disastrous town hall. Disastrous, and I put that in scare quotes because that's how all the headlines were. Trump did a disastrous town hall with CNBC or ABC? I think it was ABC. ABC, and to answer one of the questions, I believe he was talking about strategies to achieve herd immunity, and he said that we have to use herd mentality.
So like the Borg?
Yeah.
Anyone a Star Trek fan?
Which of course is just lighting up the front page on Reddit.
I love it.
Yeah.
I love it. But you know what?
I saw one article on that said he was ambushed by ABC.
One thing we need to talk about is Biden. He's not very public with this, but the dude actually has like a diagnosed speech impediment. He's had his whole life, right? Now it's more in the forward because people are realizing like, oh snap, Biden's like saying some weird stuff out, like because he's talking more, right?
He has Alzheimer's.
Look,
he's a speech impediment. He's been born with it. It's been something he's dealt with his whole life.
I know. He got over it though. He had a what did he have? He had a specific. He had a speech impediment, but he got over it with therapy.
Biden has been in politics since I think the foundation of the country.
Oh yeah.
Right.
Oh yeah. At least.
He's been in politics a long, long, long time. There are lots of videos of him, and I have recently, within the last week or two, watched a few from the 70s and from the 80s, and he was extremely quick and witty and articulate. But watching those videos and watching him how he is today, granted, there's definitely a change in personality just from age and from how the society has changed and other things. But you can also tell that there has been a little bit of a reduction of how he talks and how pronounced his words are and things like that. But that has happened to Trump too, right? If you look at videos of Trump significantly.
Yeah, Trump sounds insane, dude.
If you watch videos of his interviews,
Biden can't even answer questions off a teleprompter. He's being fed answers and he can't answer them.
Trump can't speak a sentence, dude.
Trump can't read a teleprompter.
Trump is out there like 24/7 doing interviews that he shouldn't even do, like with ABC, with people who like his campaign should know are trying to set him up. He's doing interviews and rallies and speeches 24/7, and he has like a few flubs, right? He talks about herd mentality, right?
He flubs it all the time, and and one of the reasons, in my opinion, Trump doesn't use teleprompters at all, outside of his personality. It doesn't fit his personality to do it, but I'm sure he's been told over and over and over, read teleprompters, use the speech, and he's done it a few times. And every time he does it,
State of the Union,
I think my 3-year-old can read better. Like he struggles so hard to read and pronounce things he's reading. Like his ability to read and speak, and I'm not saying that makes it so he can't be a president. Okay, that's not the point. But it is true. Like he is terrible at reading. I'm not saying he's not.
That's why he rips. That's why he goes off script all the time.
For Nate and our viewers, you guys gotta if you're on the conservative side, stomach yourselves for a minute and go watch. Like Trevor Noah just did a really funny piece. Trevor Noah's hilarious. He did a really funny piece. I'm like, Trump reading off the teleprompter. It's bad. It's bad. Granted, it's meant to be baity. I mean, it's like he's not doing any favors to Trump, nor would he try to. But it's like, ooh, yeah, you can't really chalk up what's on video. He really butchered the teleprompter.
I liked Trevor Noah for a while, but I've kind of lost interest in his stuff. To kind of reiterate my point of view for those of you that are newer to watching, politically I don't align one way or the other, but I am very anti-Trump. So
that's true. We have as vehement as an argument as I would have with Chris. Me and him.
Yeah. So when you hear me talking about anti-Trump, it is literally anti-Trump. If it was a different Republican president. So as an example, I'm watching historic videos. I was watching one of John McCain. And I think it was during during his race against Obama. And he was doing I don't know if it was a town hall or if it was just, one of his campaign rallies or something. And one of the people in the audience stood up and said, Obama is a Muslim and he's anti-American, or something like this, right? And Biden,
John
McCain takes the mic from them and says, no, he's not. He says Obama is a great man. He's a good man. I've worked with him a lot. He wants what's best for this country. We disagree on how to get there. We disagree on politics, but he is a good man. And he walks away from that person. And that was so extremely impressive to me to see that from a political figure. And I wish we could see more of stuff like that from people, where you can appreciate the fact that somebody else has a different point of view, but still understand they are a good person and they want the same goal, the end goal as you.
Right. So meanwhile, speaking of Joe Biden, to contrast that with in the 2012 election, that was Mitt Romney, right? Or was it 2008? Was it 2008?
Well, yeah, it was 2012.
Okay, so in the 2012 election, Joe Biden said of Mitt Romney, all right, so contrast this with, John McCain, no, I won't hear you talk about him like that. He's a good, decent man. He's a family man, right? Contrast that with Joe Biden, who said Mitt Romney, two black people. He was giving a speech to black people, and he said, Mitt Romney is going to throw y'all back in chains. Right? A little bit of contrast there.
Yeah. No, I agree. And I think those types of statements don't add value to what we're trying to do with politics. Unfortunately, that's what politics has become. Right? It's become, how bad can you make the other person look, and not necessarily worry about the other.
Always been that way.
They have been, but I feel like they've gotten worse.
Well, look, I think they're just more honest now. I mean, no, we're kind of deviating from COVID. We should probably get back to that because I have a great graph. Yeah. But I do want to say, I think politics have just gotten more honest. All of this stuff was just buried beneath the surface. Everybody just like for example, with Barack Obama, the same stuff was happening. He was just way more polite and polished about it. Like the same exact stuff was going down. Same with George Bush and like all of the polite presidents of the recent past.
No, I will say that
you have to be specific about what you're talking about. But even if that is the case, I still felt better.
I would have to build a case.
But you know what? I'm not okay with the version of honesty we're experiencing today, because it also like basically throws respect and dignity out the window.
Yeah,
And it throws honesty out the window too, in my opinion. This is some of the most dishonest politics that I've seen in my lifetime.
Trump was rated as the most honest president, right? He's honest
By
about
who?
what he thinks.
By
He's
you?
honest about what he thinks. He's not right.
Oh God!
Gosh, even though he has, I guess that I mean, yeah, he's
All right,
honest
back to
because-
COVID before we derail completely.
Yeah, we're doing
Show me some data, Nathan. Show me some
Okay,
data.
all right. So I have give me. Where do I have it? Okay, so there's a lot of
I
different
love
ways.
this chart.
Yes,
I know this
this
one.
is my favorite chart. This is probably the best chart to talk about COVID with. So, for those of you out there, either on my side or the other side, let's say the conspiracy theorists, regardless of what political side you're on, if you don't think coronavirus was a pandemic, if you think it was fake, if you think it was something ginned up, right? And this is, I will admit, it seems to be mostly my side doing this stuff. You got to get off that because this is not fake. So what this is here, this is a excess deaths associated with COVID-19 chart. Now, how they do this is they average out the amount of deaths that should be occurring each year, right? So there's generally like more people die in the winter because it's flu season and cold season, and whatever's associated with that. There's more death in the winter, so you have a general wave each year of death, and it's relatively predictable. And so you get a chart like this, right? So let's explain and load. Thank you. So this is the 2017 year. You see the dip, right? We go down, and then, oh God, we have a pretty bad, had a really bad flu season in the beginning of 2018, right? You see this? This is the average, this line right here, the orange, and you see
The orange is not the average.
The orange is the predicted?
No. So I'll explain this in detail. The blue line, each blue bar is a week of the year, and that is the actual death count.
Yes.
The orange line is the statistical anomaly line. So in any case, they look at historical data and they say, okay, this is, if you look at the last 10 years and you take into account population and et cetera, this is how many people should die this week, right? And then within that, there's a statistical variation. And so the orange line is when you get above this orange line, statistically something anomalous has happened to cause this. Right. Anything below that line could have just been a fluctuation within the normal ranges of what we would expect to see.
I wonder what a lower deviation would look like. Anyways, all right, so
just to be clear about what that line is.
All right, so he explained it way better than I did. I promise I understood how this worked, but he actually explained it correctly. So okay, so if you recall, in January of 2018, there was actually a really bad flu season. So we actually see that here, and these little plus lines were extended above. Last year in 2019, I mean, just a baby bump right there. Not much going on. Right, so last year wasn't too bad with the flu season. So this right here is the fulcrum of the winter season of what should be the flu season. And then here you have excess deaths just poking way out here in March, right? April, May, June, right? So this all right here, this is excess deaths to what we should be seeing. And as you can see over here, this is very stable and predictable. Right, you see a very gentle, shallow bowl right here. It goes up into a bad flu season, and it comes down. Then it's a wave. Then it's a wave, and it crests, and then it starts going down, and then bam, something happened. Right, and now some of you are probably saying, okay, a lot of people were staying out of the hospitals because they were scared of coronavirus, and that's true. But honestly, and I've been thinking about this a lot, I doubt that has almost any impressionable, like it wouldn't even be a pixel up further on this graph. I really doubt it. So as you can clearly see, there is a pandemic in the United States currently, and you can see the first spike down into the second wave, and we are actually way down off the second wave, and it looks like we're approaching something like normalcy.
So one comment on that, just from a data perspective. If you hover over one of those bars, if you read the fine print there at the bottom, it says recent data is not accurate. or something along those lines.
Mm-hmm.
Basically, sometimes it takes several weeks for death data to be reported to the CDC. So
these last ones we probably couldn't say were
so
accurate.
the last, it's generally like if you look at the last like 6 to 8 weeks, they are not an accurate representation of what the death count is. So you want to look at things prior to that. But yeah,
fair enough.
And to be honest, you have to think that right now we really kind of attacked the curve a bit with social distancing, with masks, with all these other components that, these numbers, let's just say we didn't lock down, we didn't social distance, we were all going to the movies still. I bet these numbers would be way higher. It's like coronavirus. I think part of this is like where they're
Sweden didn't lock down.
Sweden locked down. They locked down so quick. They nuked
Sweden. Sweden did zero lockdowns. No face
Sweden,
coverings.
I believe, did nothing.
Which was the one that did really well, and now they've beaten it.
New Zealand is one that did really well.
No, they not anymore.
Oh,
It got in.
No.
Did it?
Yes.
So then they probably re-locked down, to be my guess.
I'm
I
not
haven't looked
sure.
at their data recently.
I'm not sure. I heard it got in, but I didn't hear if they locked down again. I didn't hear if they let it go.
What's the Sweden thing? They didn't lock down, and they're all right.
So Sweden
basically did nothing.
They went for
From
herd
a
immunity.
lockdown,
They were one of the only countries that decided to go for it. So there's a
They had
variety
herd
of
mentality.
strategies. They had herd mentality. So
Snap.
it's very difficult to say because I actually looked up this graph for that country. And so I look at the countries around them, and there's less death in general with those countries, but there's no downward trend. I don't know. The problem is I didn't do enough on this because I don't know if Sweden has more of a population than the countries around it. If that would explain why there were more deaths. Otherwise, I'm just wrong. A whole bunch of people died, but now they're down to like 1 or 2 deaths a day, whereas the other countries around them are having like 5 to 10. You know what I'm saying?
Sweden had a bit of an uptick, if I remember right. Let me see if I can.
Right, and everybody started panicking.
They just let everybody die at once and said, "Cool."
Well, you know. Well, look. So it's one of those things. Do you think the volume of people dead in this area would be less if we just let it all happen at once and then it went away?
No way, because you have to remember the social
The therapeutics.
It's preventing the mass level. I would say it would be way higher and disproportionately above the aggregate that it is from then to today.
So I will say we successfully flattened the curve, right? And I know that doesn't look like it, but we kept this under the hospital capacity. There was not a single hospital in the United States that was officially out of supplies or overwhelmed with COVID patients. They sent patients elsewhere. They moved people around. They moved supplies around, but there was never a person that needed a ventilator in the United States that couldn't get one. So we successfully flattened the curve.
So you call that a successful flattening?
Yes, that was the intended purpose of social distancing and wearing masks. And later it turned into, well, you're going to kill grandpa if you don't keep doing it.
So do you not think that there's any merit to saying a successful flattening is pushing out the number of people that get infected or the number of cases that happen as much as you can until a vaccine's available? And I shouldn't say as much as you can, but as much as would make sense,
right.
like finding that middle ground.
Right. Well, that's the question. That is the question between me and Chris. What is the middle ground, right? So on the left, and he's probably going to, I know he takes a more, let's say, a compassionate view, right? Because they think it's compassionate to just lock the country down so people don't die of COVID. But meanwhile, people are going on unemployment. People are committing suicide. Like for every percentage of, unemployment goes up, like some tens of thousands of people commit suicide, like well documented.
Yeah, so that data shouldn't count for this though, because this is
but it does.
This is an expected temporary unemployment. It's not the same. I don't have data to support that, but my gut feeling is telling me, like, if I lost my job because I was a coal miner and coal mining was in my town was getting closed, it's different than, hey, I have to stop working for an expected couple of months or something.
Go ahead, Chris.
I will say there's been some pretty heavy studying. The results are obviously preliminary right now, but I have a good friend who's a good professional friend. So I can't say he's like my bro, but a good professional friend who is a psychiatrist at UConn, and they're doing some pretty intensive studying right now, and they are indeed finding that, like, there's some serious mental health ramifications from this that are leading to increased suicide rates. It's a very real thing right now, And so I think that it needs to be taken into consideration. I do think the economy needs to be taken into consideration. I think most people on my side of the aisle will say things like, okay, well, jobs are life is more important than jobs. And I agree with that to an extent, but I think right now it's more a matter of like, what can we do societally to adapt as much as we humanly can to COVID until we have a vaccine, whether that means wearing masks more, whether that means wearing gloves. I mean, we know masks freaking work, right? So we probably can reopen a lot of things and just like really legislate mask wearing, like actually mandate it. That's my stance. It's like make it actual finable and have it be a realistic accountability that if you don't have a mask on in public, a police officer can stop you. I do firmly believe that. Now that's also, I'm sure people on the left are against that because that's going to create like racial profiling and whatnot. But with that being said,
I don't buy that one bit. I hated those articles when they came out. It's like the social justice warriors were super quiet right after COVID came out because everybody was panicking about it. But the first social justice warrior articles that I saw after the virus came out was black people are suffering inordinately from this because people are racially profiling them.
Well,
but everybody's wearing masks. I don't buy that. I genuinely don't.
We know people of color are dying at higher rates than
I do know that. Yes.
White people. Yeah, because people of color, when we look at the African American community, there's a disproportionate income inequality. And so these people, yes, there absolutely is.
Well, there is, but that's not the cause.
No, it's not the cause, but it's like these are people that are typically more service level jobs, minimum wage jobs. Therefore, they're more in the public. Look at you look at the subway.
They're getting exposed more often.
Dude, it's the uncomfortable truth. That's the reality. You have a bunch of African American, Black Americans straight up they have no other choice or getting onto subway carts in New York. And it's like, well, shit, I just drove to DC. I refuse to use the metro in DC. I don't driving in DC. There's no way in hell I'm touching the metro.
Yep, fair enough. Yeah, well, there's once again, always there is something to drill into with that, right? And so, I mean, I know you guys well, but I mean, have you considered the fact that African Americans suffer from obesity at a higher rate than most other races? I think all other races, except for probably Polynesians.
Income inequality. When you look at low income individuals, there's higher.
Hold on. I'm talking about a strict correlation. We know that COVID targets people who are obese more. It hits them harder, right? The African American community has a higher rate of obesity than whites do. Have you considered that?
I haven't. There's no way that would be the main cause of people dying. I think
that is. But when we talk about a 1-for-1 correlation, right? So you're talking about an abstraction. You're talking about a guess. You're saying there's income inequality when we have scientists telling you that obesity affects COVID mortality.
What he's saying is the income inequality is causing a higher rate of infection because they are working in job, right? So like for me,
I agree.
My job, I was able to stay at home and work. I kept my job and I worked from home. Versus me working out in a public job where, if I'm at a fast food place or at a restaurant or any type of job like that where I am going to be exposed to other people.
I agree.
And I think so. Yeah, income inequality being the cause is kind of a secondary step down. Of why are they having to work? Well, because they don't have a cash reserve to be able to take some time off, or they don't work in the jobs on a average that allowed for you to work from home.
I will. So let me say, I will agree that is plausible, but like as usual, the social justice left jumps to the sort of the preconceived notions as opposed to the thing that we know directly affects mortality. That's my only point. I'm not saying you're wrong even, right? But maybe those two things together is probably the bulk of the statistical disparity.
Yeah, I haven't looked into it enough to know what it is, other than to know that statistically it is showing that, people of color are suffering at a disparate rate than whites.
So, so on that note, it is 9:15. We did 45 minutes on that. I think it's time to move on to our next topic.
So before we move on, I wanted to show you this because this kind of goes to something you were talking about, Nathan. This is a piece of data that I had pulled up earlier. This is a comparison of excess mortality rates across countries. and it's generally Europe and then the U.S. and a couple others. But right now I have everything turned on, and it's a cluster, and you can't tell what's going on. So as you scroll through here, you can see that the U.S. is generally near the top. It's not always at the top, and often is not. So like this peak right here, for example, is Spain. So you can see that, if they normally would have had 100 people die, they would have had, I think this means 254 people die, because this is excess deaths, right? So they more than doubled their normal death rate, and that's the peak by far across the board. But as you go, you can see that the U.S. is generally near the top or at the top. But where I find this to be a little more interesting is if you just pick a couple countries. And I'm going to pick just these two for now so that we can get a better graph, because if you pick a country that does a lot worse than the U.S., like Spain, it sizes the graph accordingly, and then you lose some granularity in the data. So this is... Oops, I thought I clicked on Germany.
I was like, what? Is Greece relevant?
Okay, so again, you can't look at the last bit of data because it's not valid yet. There's still data coming in. They're still compiling. So if you could kick back a couple weeks...
That's a month ago right there. That last dot? Not the last dot. The second to last dot is a month ago.
Yeah, okay. So...
That should be correct.
Well, this doesn't mean this was updated. When does it say this was last updated? I don't know.
True. I would assume it's...
Anyway, I don't yet. I'll have to look and see if I can find that at some point. And if I can, I'll update it. But anyway, the point I wanted to show was... Germany, one point to make, excess deaths as a percentage takes into account population differences.
Yep.
Right. So one of the things I hate is that people say, well, the U.S. has more cases than somebody else.
Yep.
And then Trump says, well, obviously, because we have more testing. There's some truth to that, right? If we didn't do any testing, we would have no known cases, right? Or very few. So you have to take into account that kind of stuff when you look at this. So just saying, we have the most cases, that's not a very clear picture. You can't use that to define the quality of the response that we had to this. So I like this data in particular, and some others as well, but because this takes into account population, and it takes into account your current expected death rate, right? So we talk about comorbidities. Comorbidities are a huge thing with COVID. A massive percentage, something in the 90s, I think, if you are the people that are dying from COVID have a comorbidity. It's very, very, very high. So it's important to also take into account, when you look at a death rate of a country, to think about the health level of that country. If it's an extremely healthy, not obese, not diabetic society, a young society versus old, your death rate's going to be lower. So the interesting thing about excess deaths, if you compare it country to country, is that's all taken into account already. Because could those comorbidities also increase population deaths in general, right? More people die from heart attacks, more people die from other issues that are related to these other comorbidities as well. So it kind of takes that into account a little bit. Germany was a good example of how they were able to flatten the curve in Europe. Not every country did as good as Germany, and I'm admitting that by using this. I'm kind of cherry picking the data a little bit to just show that by doing some level of shutdown, by having a society that listens to their politicians, and their politicians come out and say, hey, this is serious. We need to take it serious. We need to follow these rules.
Put Sweden.
I'm going to next. I am. Yeah. So Sweden's next.
We got to move on to our next topic.
My point here is that it does make a difference. It can make a difference if followed.
Right, but I'm also right now I'm looking at a graph of who's obese and who's not, and we're obese, and Germany is much less obese.
And again, obesity increases your original expected death rate. This is excess deaths. This is deaths that happened that wouldn't have expected.
But combined with COVID, obesity.
It is not 100% correlate. Yeah, I agree with you.
It's not 100%.
No. Like, what I'm saying is, if you,
I've done my micro Googling, so now I'm an expert on this topic.
Yeah.
I do have to side with Nate from whatever Google has provided me so far, that it does look like being obese doubles the rate of the chance of dying from COVID.
Sure, but what does being obese increase your normal rate of dying without COVID? Obese people die at a higher rate than unobese people.
Yeah,
So
but
do you
that's
think
factored in. That's
Do you think
factored in.
Yeah. So what you're saying is that
Not based on how he said it. He said being obese doubles your rate of dying from COVID. So if you're obese and get COVID versus not obese and get COVID, you're twice as likely to die. It doesn't say if you're obese versus not being obese, your likelihood of dying from a heart attack or other complications.
Right, but that's factored into the regular mortality. This is excess mortality.
Exactly. That's what I'm saying. So,
Okay, you're saying the same thing.
No, I'm saying that us being obese already increases our normal expected deaths. These are extra deaths on top of that.
I know.
Right? So it's not 1-to-1. It's not like, well, none of those should have happened. Like COVID doesn't make any of them happen that would have, but it lowers that a bit. This is also Sweden being dumped on top of it. So you can see that we've actually done worse than Sweden.
Right. It's almost analogous in the beginning, and then
So
then they went straight down.
So what this tells me
now?
Maybe. Again, I don't know. I don't know if this data is valid or not. It may
Probably
be.
not.
My guess is
no way.
My guess is not, because it's showing a negative number for expected deaths.
Unless hey, like we're all immortal now.
No, it could be that, because if you think like sick people in general that would have maybe lived for a couple months and then died, maybe died here. And so you may see a drop in mortality before. All right,
Tim. We got to move on. We got to go.
What this says to me, we don't yet, but hold on. What this says to me is that proper, like really taking this seriously, having a government that comes in and says, yeah, this is serious, let's do it. Having a population that listens to that government and says, yeah, we need to follow these rules, can be effective. And in my opinion, it's also showing that it was not very effective here. And I think what I'm trying to drive at from this is that us not being very open and honest and upfront about this, and not taking it as serious as we needed to from a leadership perspective and a government perspective, cost us. We have a higher extra mortality rate than countries that followed the rules. Now, and had a leadership that backed it and talked scientifically and said, this is serious. Here's what you do to stop it. Here's the steps you need to take. We need to do a lockdown.
All right. Look, and I know we have to move on. We do have to move on because we want to talk about this other thing, and now we're going to have way less than 45 minutes. But
the other thing's less important.
Maybe the obesity. Okay, so combined with the obesity, and combined with the fact that people like Governor Cuomo, right? So like, I have such a problem with what you're saying. So like, I get what you're saying, and you're mostly right, but you're not taking into account the fact that like Governor Cuomo is being lauded as the best governor for COVID. Like he's like, he's the best guy. New York should be the model for how we respond to it. And it's like almost all of the people in the United States as of 4 months ago died from coronavirus in like a New York City elderly home, because Governor Cuomo, the paragon of science for the left, was shoving old people that they knew had COVID back into the elderly homes. Right.
We don't like Cuomo over here.
Okay.
Yeah, I was going to say, like, I'm not seeing anything that says Cuomo's this or that. And I'm not just talking about Trump. I'm talking about in general. I'm talking about our culture as a whole of
I understand that.
Anti-science, of anti-vaccine, of anti-information, of all this misinformation that goes around. And that has an effect. And that's what I'm trying to say. I'm not saying this is Trump's fault. Trump played a part. But many other people did as well. Many other information outlets did as well. And it's also part of our culture. It's part of a thing where we're raising, we have a family that says you can't trust the government. You can't trust at all. I do not, to your point earlier, I don't think that you should just trust the government blindly. But to say you can't trust the government, you can't trust this, the vaccines are here to control us, whatever, right? All this goofy ass shit, it plays a part in this. And so Germany is a different culture than ours. They are healthier than we are by far. And so there's a lot of that in there as well. But it's not enough to make up this difference, in my opinion. And I'd love this to break into that data. I'll have to try and do that at some point. But the way I read this, it basically is saying, yes, we made an attempt to do a lockdown and to really reduce, the effect of COVID in this country, and it was not very effective. And in my opinion, that is based on us not really following the rules that needed to happen.
All right, fair enough. Chris, what's behind you? Or what's going on there?
I just had sushi for dinner, so I figured.
Oh my god, it's the best.
It really, I want to celebrate it, so I made it my background.
All right, fair enough.
Closing remark: nobody on the left likes Governor Cuomo. That's the moderate.
That's good to hear. I didn't know that.
Yeah, nobody on the left likes Cuomo.
Huh? You know, he has like a massive popularity rating in his state, and I'm sure that's Republicans and Democrats because it's like 80-something% for God knows what reason.
The moderates love him, dude.
Because they think he's a CNN anchor.
They confuse him for his brother. No, yeah, the Dems love him because he presents himself very, very well.
He's got that New York voice too, and he's very confident about it.
Full-blown moderate, like I can't think of specifics, but there's definitely things he's done that.
Yeah. All right, we can get into that at some point. So, all right, so the next topic that we have now, like 33 minutes instead of 45 minutes for Tim, is so Chris asked me to read an essay. An essay? Is this an essay? It's an essay.
It's like a philosophical publication. It's from a book.
Right. It's from philosophical publication. So he sent me over this PDF, and I started going through it. And I'm going to be honest, what I was reminded of was I was essentially reading something that was written at the effort level of something that I would have turned in college, right? As an undergrad.
Was it a Trump speech?
No.
Yes. Sorry, Chris. So
that's disrespectful.
Oh, you said undergrad level. I thought you
undergrad level. Yes. Okay. So this is Private Government: How Employers Rule Our Lives and Why We Don't Talk About It by Elizabeth Anderson. So I understand that you have a large amount of respect for her, and that's why you asked me to read this. So I'm going to be straight up with you in the audience. I didn't get through it. I got through about 3 or 4 pages, and that's about all we'll have time to go through. But I wanted to go through this essentially line by line and just tear this thing to shreds, I think. And maybe you'll push back, and maybe it turns out I'm just
line by line. Are you trying to take our few viewers we have and just guys leave now?
No. This is great. It's so hyperbolic. It's going to make awesome content.
Line by line.
So before we get started with that, I just wanted to. So as I was reading it, I was reminded of an essay that I would have turned in, and that means low effort. That means I thought of an idea, and then I just bent the world until it conformed with that idea. No matter, as I started doing my research, everything conflicted with me. I was like, nope, this is how I started. I don't want to rewrite it. Everything that I see, I'm just going to cherry pick until my thing looks like it kind of makes sense, and then I'm going to shove it off because the teachers don't really care anyways. That's exactly what I thought about when I read this. And I thought to myself, this sounds like somebody who heard about somebody who was talking about somebody they knew who had a job, right? And then extrapolating conclusions from it. More charitably, a lot of people don't understand, especially young people, don't understand the contractual nature and the free nature of work, right? They think of it as something crushing that they have to step into, whereas it's more, they don't understand that it's more of a contractual thing. So we can get into this.
So why do you, to kind of back up though, you're making a statement, and I don't know, do you have data to support that? Why do you know or think that most people feel that way?
Because I felt that way until a couple years ago.
Are you the epitome of most people?
No, I'm going to acknowledge that I don't have a study for this.
Okay, so you feel like this is the case. Like that's how you felt, and you feel like a lot of people. Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. So what she's writing about here is something that could be marketed to the person that I was 3 or 4 years ago, right? Because I didn't understand how business works, right? And so we can actually get into some of the specifics when we start going through this, but that's how I wanted to couch this. Now that I've thoroughly poisoned the well.
Yeah, I still have no idea what's going on.
Right. Thoroughly poisoned the well. I'm going to do it just a little bit more. Did I mention? So I looked up her bio too, because as I was going through it, I was like, this person has no idea what it's like to actually work. And so I went and I looked up her bio. She got her doctorates, and then she went straight into professorship. This person probably worked while she was in college, but never actually went into, say, a career.
That's so unfair criticism. Do you know how hard?
I don't think so. The reason why I don't think so is because it shines through very clearly in her writing.
PhD is work, dude. It's
no. I'm not. Whoa. I'm not saying it's not hard. I have utmost respect for people who can do that because I cannot do that. Right? There's no way in my life that I will ever get a PhD. It is a very hard thing to do. I'm talking about understanding the contractual nature of a private business that you are engaging with, right? Where they value your service and you value their employment, right? It's a two-way road. That's something that she doesn't understand in this. But let's get into it.
I think you're grading her in the wrong framework and taking some low blows. Like, it's like you don't.
I think they're well deserved.
I mean, you said the other week, like, you don't need to be African American to discuss like race rights in this country. Why does she need to have worked at a factory to discover employment?
So let's talk about it on its merits, shall we?
Let's do it.
Okay.
Let's go.
I still don't know what's going on.
Okay, so Chris, can you describe the main thrust of this real quick, like 10 sentences or less, because we are running out of time.
Basically, her point is saying that due to the consolidation of power, major companies and corporations and the wealth that they hold, that essentially the rights that we want from a free government are infringed on anyways by the power of capitalism.
Yeah, pretty much. So the first, and apparently it says chapter 2, so I don't know what I have, but it's not chapter 1. So this opening
is the important stuff.
This is the important stuff, right? So this opening portion right here is essentially what she does is she talks about the communist dictatorships in our midst, as it says, right? And so what she does is she goes through and she says, this is what a business is like, and this is how it's like a communist dictatorship. Isn't that awful? Right? So, and that's
they are like communist dictatorships.
Say what?
They are like communist dictatorships.
Okay, all right. Let's go for it. Let's go through it line by line here. So there's going to be a little bit of reading, and then I'm going to stop very frequently to exclaim loudly. Okay, so imagine a government that assigns almost everyone a superior whom they must obey. First sentence, what the heck? So first of all, we have to go through the difference between government and a private business, right? So when you interview with a boss, you are interviewing that boss, right? People my age don't really understand that yet.
This is unfair criticism on her. This is like... So basically, think of it this way, right, Nathan? So the point of what it's making is that let's super basic. Say you just graduated high school, you have no trade skills. All right. I can play the corporate life too. So if we want to talk about the corporate game, like engineers, or if we want to talk about
that's me.
Yeah, we can go there. Let's talk simple, basic terms for our viewers. Let's say you graduate high school. And you have no other degrees, no training, which is a lot of people. 30% of our country have a bachelor's degree. That tells me that 70% don't. So
is it bachelor degree or higher? Or 30% have a bachelor degree?
30% have a bachelor's or higher.
Okay.
So 70% don't. When you graduate high school, because of the power that certain corporations have had to consolidate and monopolize the economy, your options are very limited. You can work at McDonald's. You can work at Burger King. You work at Wendy's. You can work at Dollar General, right?
Yeah, but that's disconnected from reality. That's just so what you're describing is a bad economy where your options are limited, right?
Your options are limited, and all of these places have more power over you than the government. And say you dislike one, all right. Say you hate going to McDonald's because they McDonald's decides to cut your pay or whatever. What are you going to do? Go to Burger King? And what are they going to do, right? Your options are so limited when it comes to employment that even when you change the name, the constructs of it are still limited. And these companies have more wealth accumulated than entire countries in this world.
So what does that have to do with anything?
What it's saying is that they're too...
hold on. What does that have to do with your contract with McDonald's?
Yep. So it's basically it's bigger than that. You're confined by the options you have in front of you, and so basically, I know you're going to build off that. I just fundamentally disagree with the fact that that you are just limited on the outset.
No, obviously, there's a finite amount of companies, but you can do so many different things in this country.
Let me clarify this.
Real quick,
because I think it's really helpful.
No, you go ahead. You go ahead.
Just to give you the one last background, like her main point, because I'm missing it right now. I haven't shared it. Is basically her point is that on the right, and especially when it comes to like Milton Friedman, we have such a fear of centralized power, because when power is centralized, it becomes corrupt. If the government decided tomorrow that everybody has a 10% increase in taxes, we throw a riot. But what she's arguing is that that same centralization of power has accumulated in a small amount of corporations and employers, and so our choices are limited, and we indeed have had rights infringed upon by our employers, and we don't have a choice about that because they have so much centralized power.
Incorrect. You can leave that company at any time. It is a voluntary agreement.
And go to another one.
That is
same construct.
That is the main distinction. Not only that, you don't have to work for somebody. You can work for yourself, but that is an edge case, I will grant you. But that there's a fundamental difference between the contract between a government and the contract between an employer, right? The contract, like I can't even get into it tonight. Like, the government is not an employer is an employer. There's very big differences, right? Mainly that it's you can't get away from your government, but you can get away from an employer at any point. Okay. So it sounds like we agree to disagree on that. So we'll just keep pushing forward. Otherwise we won't get through this.
Real quick, I want to make sure it's clear. I just did a quick Google search. I can't comment on how many people in the country have a degree or not, but that doesn't really matter. It's the working force that matters. If you're 65 or older, you're retired, it doesn't matter if you have a degree or not anymore, right? So 55 to 64-year-olds, it's 43%. And 20
bachelors or higher?
Yeah, tertiary education. I'll just say that. 25 to 34-year-olds, it's 50%. And my guess is if you would continue to go younger, that's going to continue to increase. So if you think of your parents' generations, like my father is an example, college was not it was just starting to become a big thing for him to get pushed. His parents were talking about it.
I would say that actually furthers the point, because really what it comes down to too is, like, let's talk about skilled labor. If you're an engineer, or let's say you're a data analyst, you're really limited. Data analyst is a hard one, but you're relatively limited under the big corporations you can work for. And these companies,
right? But you chose that. But you chose that career path. Well, we can get into an argument about how young people are when they choose that, but and I would probably agree with you mostly. But like, you gotta do something, man. You gotta work. You have to contribute in order to receive money. Like, this isn't an anti-work podcast, right?
It looks like right now, just real quick, 25 to 30-year-olds, it's 36% have a bachelor's degree.
All right, the two of you have a discrepancy there.
Well, I said tertiary education, so
you're right. You're fair. But anyways, let's keep going. But that's actually just beside the point on this. But yeah, let's dive into a little bit heavier after.
Yeah. Okay, all right. So sentence one, we've already had a massive disagreement, right? Right out the gate. So, sentence two. Although superiors give most inferiors a routine to follow, there is no rule of law.
Before we keep going through this, what is the point of this talk? Like, just writing this. So he gives you a paper to read, you read it, and you don't agree with it. Like, what are we trying to talk about with this? What is this an example of? Are we talking
essentially
about
the nature of the economy, or the tyranny of business, or the monopoly of business?
Okay, so this is we should treat this paper, in my opinion, unless we want to just do a deep dive on why this paper sucks or is great.
Yeah, that's pretty much what I'm doing.
I'm not really interested in that. Like, who cares? I don't care if this paper sucks or is great. I care about what is going on in general.
It's relatively reflective of far left ideology. So a lot of people on the left would basically subscribe to this notion. Myself,
right? We're not just talking about a paper in the void. This is instructive as to what the right would be counter to, or what the left is ensconced in at this point. So, I mean, your job is pretty much to do what you just did. This
next line is saying that basically, whereas in government, at least we have control over our superiors, our elected officials, our representation. In a private government of a corporation, you don't have that. Yes, you have managers. Yes, you have promotions, but nobody controls your board of directors. Nobody controls your CEO at the ground level. Most of the time, these people are appointed through existing relationships.
I know we get to that. I don't know if that's what this sentence means. I think I stopped a little too soon.
Yeah, it does. It does get to that later in the paper. That's basically what it's calling about. It's like there's no routine to follow. An executive of a corporation could just bring their bro on to be another executive, and those two people could just like stop over whatever.
Right. If you don't like it, start your own corporation.
Look, I fell asleep
Should be easy,
line by line. When my professors would go line by line in college, I'd fall asleep or leave the class. I think that's going to be a terrible idea for this podcast.
We're just going to suffer through it this time, and we can bring it up in our tactical meeting later. All right. So I'll read until I have additional thoughts that we can come up with. Tim, I'm sure you'll survive, buddy. Hang in there, buddy. Okay, so I'm going to recap this sentence so we can encapsulate in something that I disagree with. Although superiors give most inferiors a routine to follow, there is no rule of law. Orders may be arbitrary and can be changed at any time without prior notice or opportunity to appeal. Boom. Right, I was right. I needed to read one more sentence. You know what that's called? That's called a shitty boss. Nobody likes those, right? And they exist. Yes, but that's called a shitty boss. Most bosses aren't like that. Most bosses are normal people that will talk to you when something is going to change and give you as much notice as they can because they are as much on your side as they are their bosses, right? So everybody has somebody to answer to, but a good boss looks out for his people. I'm not saying that's all bosses, but that
even then the bosses are in the confines of what the executives have decided. So say you have the world's worst health insurance and your boss is slightly better. Then
why are you working there?
Well, where else are you going to go? Like, there's not
the other place.
Do you? But then, even still, like you're going to run into the same obstacles. Like, I think that the issue here is that
Chris, you understand? You negotiate your salary and your package, right? Like our generation has the mentality that you're going to go in there and take whatever they offer you. That's not how it works. That's not how the older generation works. You go in there and you... Yes,
Chat just made a great point. So kind of a question to you, Nate, because I think it's a question on a comment you're making. They said, Amanda said, how many people are in a financial position to pick and choose who their boss will be?
And that's really a critical point that she makes.
If you plan your life well, then you should be in a good spot.
Yeah, I think that's another key point that Anderson makes. It's like right? It may sound good on paper. That's just not how it works in the real world.
Well, you can say that, but it does work that way in the real world. Right. So I'm not saying that there's no variability in life. Like you can set your life up the best and still fail. That happens all the time. Entrepreneurs will tell you that.
Yeah, look at our podcast.
Right, exactly. We're in the middle of failing. Right? So but we will the only way to succeed then is to keep trying, right? So you have to acknowledge that things are going to go downhill. But the person who succeeds is somebody who pushes forward despite their adversity, right? So you take that job at McDonald's, even though you hate it, and it's supposed to be the scummiest job in society, and then you become the manager at McDonald's because you're trying to be responsible, and they see that, and then you get promoted, and then you get promoted, and then you go somewhere else because on your resume is manager at McDonald's, not just McDonald's flunky, right? Or and then you got your degree. Well, you are in control of your life. Everybody in the audience, you are in control of your life. You can do whatever you can set your mind to. And this is what we were talking about with the American dream.
I don't disagree, but not everybody should have to do that. We all should be granted a level of relative comfort in our life journey. I don't think someone doesn't need to strive to be the CEO of McDonald's. They should be.
That's not what I'm saying. I'm not what I'm saying. I'm saying you generally get what you strive for. Right. So if you're not striving for anything and you just go into that default job and you stay as an employee in McDonald's and don't try to get promoted, you're generally going to get that. That's what you're going to get. Like your life is going to reflect what you attempt. Generally speaking, not talking about the edge cases where life hits you hard.
I will actually disagree with that from my life experience in that it's a combination of your effort and your luck. If you put in as much effort as the next guy, or close to it, and you're not in the right place at the right time and he was, or vice versa, then that plays a huge factor. And I don't want to get into too much details about what I'm about the experience I've seen, but I have seen numerous people with 10 times the ability as the next guy, not get the same opportunities because either they didn't suck up to the right person, they weren't in the right place at the right time, they were, a little late to the party or a little early to the party or whatever, right?
Right, but look, we're sitting in chat right now with somebody who went out and made their own foundation. Like, Chris, you saw a problem in the world, and you said, this is not going to get solved by sitting on my ass or having a default job or just going to McDonald's. You said, I am going to solve this problem. That's what I'm saying. And you went out and you did it. And you put a tremendous amount of effort into it.
I did, and I really appreciate, that praise, and I don't disagree. I made huge sacrifices, and I worked incredibly hard. I have to be very conscious that my story is very much a unicorn story. I don't think it's
I don't think so.
It's an exception.
I don't think so. I don't think there's any world in which Chris Scott, barring getting cancer at age 20, doesn't end up where you are now. Right? So I'm basically just practicing. No, I'm preaching what you practice.
So you're basically saying if you put in the time and the effort, you're going to get there.
Generally.
Okay, so go talk to all the minor league baseball players, all the people that didn't get into the NBA, all the people that put their lives into playing college football.
That's different.
Okay, well, the point is that works.
The goal there is to get into the percent of a percent of a percent. Almost nobody ever gets in there. Out of all of the people who want to get in there, like 0.001%.
Okay, so do you think the number of people that would like to be upper management or make X number of dollars a year or be a CEO or whatever the criteria is, do you think that number of people that would like to have that role exceeds the number of roles available?
Yes, those who are no, I don't think, generally speaking, that number exceeds.
You don't think so?
I think go ahead, Chris. Wait, hold on. Let me answer that.
Let me finish your point, and I'll go.
If you want that, you work towards it, and there's ways of getting there. Once you get into the work environment, you can see the ladder. You understand how to get there. And if you want that thing, you can generally get it as long as you're smart and healthy and you don't have a massive life. Like, I'm telling, like, yes, those things happen to you. But if you generally push towards the thing and you know how to get to it, you can get to it. And I don't think there's a significant amount of people who are outside of where they want to be with work.
I don't disagree, and I think one important thing to keep in mind is just bringing this to the confines of Anderson's point. It's not so much about the opportunities for upper mobility, because I think she would probably most likely genuinely agree, like, yes, hard work does equate into upper mobility. It's more the confines of the control of where upper mobility still exists within. No matter what, we're still subjected to the overall kind of like powers at hand at the top of the spectrum, and we have no say in who ends up in those roles, right? We have very, very little say.
So what?
That matters so much, dude. Because
why? Let me tell you something, Chris.
But those people have massive control over their employees.
So what? So here's the problem is that we're having this conversation in a vacuum, in the context of somebody, Anderson, who's never actually been in a business, and it shows because you just have this idea of like some frat boy bringing in his buddy, and sometimes that happens, and sometimes that guy makes a bad mistake. But when he does, his employees leave him and his company fails. So it is in his best interest not to bring in his buddy, right? So
it's more on the side of like, so look at it this way, right? Let's look at a major. Let's just use engineering firms, because Anderson talks about engineering firms in this article, and I actually think it's a relatively good thing to equate to. So you have corporations that have tens of thousands of employees, right? And every single one of those people chose to work there. But now these people's retirements, health insurance, whatnot are embedded into their company. This is where it becomes a problem. You have unelected individuals running these corporations that you can't just hop ship 10 years into your job without huge sacrifices that are
what sacrifice?
Your retirement.
You can roll your 401k over into another one.
If your corporation was going to have a pension, that pension's nuked. Your health insurance is going to change. You know, and I think the issue is that it's just not as simple as just hopping ship, right? Like
I'm not saying it's easy.
Yeah, and what I'm saying is that these unelected individuals in these board of directors that are again appointed have so much power that they can just say overnight. They can just cut everyone's health insurance. And the reality is most people aren't going to change ship.
Yes, they are. Yes, they are. So that's like you're having this conversation in a vacuum. Like you think that the actual world doesn't exist and people will not just straight up leave the company if they lose their health insurance. I guarantee you 100%. Me, as like a first-year cybersecurity with almost nothing on my resume, yeah, I'm gone. I am gone as soon as somebody else picks me up. And that goes for just about everybody else in that company. I keep going back to this. Like you're having this conversation, like sort of like theoretically in a vacuum where like all of this nefarious stuff can just happen and nobody can do anything about it. But like, unlike a government that she's trying to compare this to, you absolutely can and do very frequently leave the company. Like people leave companies all the time. My current, semi-boss, I looked at his resume. He's been at like 15 different companies, right? People move around all the freaking time for reasons way less arbitrary than completely losing their pension. So my point is like, so we just had a disagreement between the two of us, let alone actually comparing it to a communist government that you can't get away from, right? Which is the major difference. So, I mean, I know we still disagree on a couple points here. Let's get another sentence in before we plots here. Okay. Inferiors have no right to hold on. They are neither elected nor removable by inferiors. Okay, that is generally the case, but you can leave again. Inferiors have no right to complain in court about how they are treated, except in a few narrowly defined cases. And this is absolutely incorrect. Have you heard of HR? Have you heard of HR? I already lost a boss. I've been with this company for 2 years, and I lost one to an HR incident. Gone, because somebody complained.
HR is not a court.
Okay, but in this analogy, they're trying to make this analogous to a communist dictatorship. Court would be the complaint system at a company.
That line's pretty intense. That line's, I'll give you this one. That line is relatively, because that's somewhat disregarding. I feel, no, that's it. I would say the only way I can try to defend that is if we're talking about certain, arbitrary lawsuits that are just unfounded. But more than anything else, that line's a bit extreme.
Right. Okay. We agree on something. Cool. And then the next sentence is they also have no right to be consulted about orders they are given. Again, and I think maybe I'll make this the last point, and then we can talk comments, and then maybe wrap up with some stuff or whatever. This is, and look, we only got through one paragraph, and I just couldn't do it. But this is, again, this is in a vacuum. This is like ignoring how people act in real life. If I had a boss who was this much of a dick, I would leave the company, right?
Like, well, maybe you're in a position where
I'm not.
Your particular field has a somewhat equal supply and demand, or a larger demand and supply.
There's a demand.
There are a lot of jobs out there, and I'm not in one of them, right? My background is engineering. I have an engineering degree, so technical fields are highly in demand these days. But there's a lot of fields that are not. And if you're in one of those fields and you're not in high demand, and one of the people in chat was talking about how a lot of times you're coming out of college and a job is looking for like entry. And I've seen this actually in engineering as well, somewhat entry level job looking for 5 years of experience, right? Like to even get in the door is really difficult sometimes. So if you're in one of those positions where you're just trying to get a job and you get one, and the company sucks, and the management sucks, or the benefit sucks, or one of these things that we've been talking about a little bit is terrible, you aren't necessarily in a position where you can just be like, you know what? Fuck it, I'm out. I'm going to go somewhere else, because there might not be somewhere else. Or you might not be in a financial position to make that move.
The majority of Americans can't stomach an $1,000 emergency. How are you going to just take 2-3 weeks off to find a new job?
I understand. So at that point, you're doing a calculus. Like again, not in a vacuum. You're talking about a real person. Your job when you go to a company is to interview them. Job interviews are for you to interview them. So
in a perfect world.
Like a dick. No, not in a perfect world. In the
a perfect world.
No.
Most people.
Let me explain. Let me explain. Because if you don't research that company and you don't interview your future boss, it is your fault, generally speaking. if you show up and they're a dick and you could have gone to that
Are
other
your
job.
bills going on hold until you find the right job?
So you take that calculus, you say, all right, I'm a person who has bills. I need to suck it up and do this job. Like, this is not in a vacuum. A person who has those bills that you're talking about is going to take the job.
Not those bills. Like,
no. Like, I'm talking about the person who really needs that job right now, which is the implication that you guys are giving out.
Yeah, which is the majority of people.
Okay, so they do that calculus on their own, and they say, yeah, this guy's kind of a dick, and this company doesn't look like it's going to be around for really long, but I need a paycheck now.
To be clear, I'm not arguing for this paper, because I still, to this moment, have no idea what we're talking about. Okay?
Yeah, I know, because I couldn't get through very much. I'm sorry.
I am purely arguing some of the points you're making on what the job market looks like, right? And this is not just from my experience. A company I used to work for recently has done a pretty big layoff. And I know a lot of people that have been laid off or looking for jobs. And I've been talking to them repeatedly over the last couple months. And what I keep hearing from them is there are many, many, many applicants for every single job they're applying for. And these guys are all educated, technically educated, some of them engineers, some of them drafters.
It's a pandemic, though.
To the point, their bills didn't go away because of the pandemic.
I understand that. I never said they would. I don't know why you would imply that. I thought that.
Yes, I realize this is relatively a low blow, unfair argument because of the pandemic. But how many jobs have furlough days right now? And there's nothing anybody can do about it. Whereas the equivalent to that is, let's just say the government decided to say, all right, everybody, 10% increase in your taxes. There's nothing you can do about it. We'd have riots, man. We'd throw riots
because we can't leave that government.
But you can't leave.
So you're equating a black swan event, which is the pandemic. I mean, you said it was a bad faith argument, pretty much. This is a black swan event that nobody can control, not the employers or the government. The government did shut the businesses down, so I mean, you could attribute this to the government, but I mean, that's kind of semantics. But it's not the same. You can't leave an authoritarian government unless you get on a boat from Cuba to go to Florida. But you can't leave companies. That's probably the main counterpoint to this first paragraph. And then like the rest of this, the next 2 pages, 3 pages, it's like all the same stuff. And this is just like, I'm looking at this and this is something I could have written if I was bullshitting a college professor. I'm sorry, man. I'm sorry.
I think that what I think we're talking about is, I don't even know. I have no idea. I don't know what the big point is. Like, what is the argument? Like, the government should control something or shouldn't? Or
I don't know. What is the
argument here
for this?
Like, what is this stating is the problem, and what is the prescription for it? I don't even know.
The argument is that we have over centralized power in corporations that have the ability to infringe on people's rights. And the solution, basically, she lays it out later in the paper, is and it's usually complementary to the idea of regulating the amount of money that companies have into politics, as well as allowing for elected officials on their board of directors. So having company, employee, elected, so people within your company could serve on the board of directors.
No. Listen, but okay, so I don't have a problem with promoting from within. As a matter of fact, that happens a lot of the time. I'd actually be curious to see what the statistics are, but as I understand, that happens a lot. But
not for high up jobs.
Oh man, I lost the point. Oh, I'm so sorry. I had something too. I was about ready to fucking throw the hammer down. I don't remember.
It was the amount of money from companies into politics, and then also elected into.
Oh yeah. As an employee, Chris, I have absolutely no idea how to run my company. I have none. Therefore, my input for who should run it is absolutely invalid. I cannot imagine a less qualified person to in my company to have input on the CEO. And I don't care how the company is run as long as I still get my paycheck and the company generally.
Yeah, I don't actually agree that the employee should be able to vote for who runs it. Similar, I mean, kind of along your point, what you're saying, Nathan. It works the same way in democracy. I mean, an interesting quote, I forget where I heard it originally, and I'm sure they didn't say it the first time, was democracy is the tyranny of the uninformed. right?
Yeah.
It's like you don't have to know what the hell you're talking about to make a vote or to have an opinion and to make that effective, And I think that's more dangerous when you have a smaller population, like a group of employees in a company that have some right to determine how the company's led. I don't agree with that. I think, on that aspect, I do think it's,
it's a minority. The goal is, at least the way I interpret it, is that, like, let's have a qualified employee, which I'm sure within like these companies of 10, 20, 30,000 employees, some manager out there would be valuable on the board of directors. Let's have one or two symbolic seats on the board of directors where somebody within the company, if they're really passionate, can get elected onto that board of directors to at least serve at that level.
So you're only talking public companies with an X number of employees. You're not talking some mom and pop shop that's 10 people.
Yeah, we're talking massive public. This does not talk. This is
Chris.
Like the Walmart
usually you demonstrate that resolve, commitment, and wherewithal by getting promoted into that position. That's how you
just as a comment there, Chris. You do realize that board of directors are voted on by shareholders.
Exactly, but those people have nothing to do with the company. You're not going to have.
They own the company.
They have a vested interest in the success of that company and having the stocks go up,
but not the rights of the workers.
Okay, but if the best way to run a company, and we're going to disagree on this, and it's probably we're going to have to leave it. If the best way to run the company is to lower wages, then like if it genuinely is, if they have to lower wages for whatever reason, then they should do that, right? If that's what ends up coming out of hiring this new guy, and he's like, okay, I'm here, I'm looking at this, our profit margins are absolutely crap, we're going to be bankrupt in 6 months, we got to lower salaries. Right, that's the kind of stuff that happens when you bring on new people and they lower salaries. That's like that would be like nobody comes in and makes arbitrary decisions, and then if they do, which is extremely rare, the company ends up getting run into the ground. Like none of this happens in a vacuum. There's no Scrooge McDuck evil capitalists out there going onto boards willy-nilly, like just messing companies up and then laughing off to the next one. It just doesn't happen. Most of the time.
So I basically at time anyways, but I would love. I feel like our at least, and Tim, I would love to hear your thoughts. I can't say any more than I've already had. And I think with you, Nate, I think it's really kind of just like at this point, these are the sides, right? This is the sides of the aisle.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, I still don't really know where I stand on a topic that I don't know what I'm talking about. So,
well, I mean, you heard us talk about the things we were talking about. You said stuff.
Yeah, on the particular individuals of what we're talking about here, I have views, but I don't know what the goal is or what the top level is, right? Like, I don't think
be more honest then. Right?
I don't think we should have
micro issues.
Yeah, micro issues. I don't think it makes sense to have employees vote for leadership of the company. Just because a company decides to hire you doesn't mean that they're deciding that you should have a say in how the company's run. I don't think that really makes sense to me. Like, if I get hired on as a burger flipper at McDonald's, should I have a say in who's running McDonald's? That doesn't make any sense. They hired me to flip burgers. I don't know shit about how to run a company. Why should I vote and put somebody in office that I don't know what I even want them to say or do, right? Or in position to run this company. So, and I think it kind of runs into the same thing you see in politics, where if that was the case, you would start seeing people running these companies that are less worried about the success of the company and more worried about their own success and getting reelected and revoted in. And so you look at politics now and you see that this is so how everything is now politicized. We even use that word as saying it's now driven by individual emotion rather than just what they're out trying to do. So I don't agree. I don't think we should have that. But I do think that the point is valid to say that when you get hired into a company, when you get a job, you rarely, I would say less than half the people that I know have an easy out, can just go to another job or can just wait another 3 months or 6 months to find another job to pay those bills, right? When you get an opportunity to work somewhere and you take it. And yes, there's plenty of opportunities where after working there for a couple of years, you find another job that has better pay or better wages and you make a change, and that happens all the time. But that doesn't mean that you just could have done that a year ago. That opportunity wasn't there for you. So
right. And then I would say tough love. Suck it up. You need that money. You have to work there. Sure. Like, life sucks, man.
Well,
so in that I will agree with you.
To that point, I think that's why there are regulations for minimum wages, and there are unions, and there are other things that have worked to try and empower the employee to give them a fighting chance. Without those things, we saw historically what has happened, how much advantage was taken of the employee from those employers, because the employers do have the power, they do have more control. And when you have unions, sometimes they can oftentimes, I'm not generally pro-union, pro-modern union, because I think they've pushed back too far. I am the idea of unions. But I think, some of the modern unions have pushed back too far. But, I think that you have to find some balance of equality where there is power from the employees and power from the employers that finds some middle ground, so that, to the point of Nathan, you can just go find another job rather than one guy owning all the jobs, right? Let's say there was no other company than Amazon anymore. Amazon has
but you're doing a thought experiment in the wild that's in a vacuum.
Amazon is doing this, just it won't happen probably, current law in the U.S.
No, everybody said that about every single company that grew as big as they did in their time.
Why is Amazon as big as it is?
Because we all love the service it provides.
It's not because of that. They are as big. I don't remember the exact number, but I want to say it's something like 80% or 90% of the profitability of Amazon is from their data services. It's not from their actual delivering product to your door.
That's a service that they provide that people like.
That you don't even use. Business uses it.
I actually literally use it.
Okay, I don't mean you.
I have servers in Amazon AWS right now.
I don't mean you as a person that does cybersecurity. I mean you as a general human in the U.S.
Yes, right? Me as a general human. I have a server.
I personally do not have a server with AWS, nor does 99% of probably the population of this country.
It's a shame. It's really cheap. You should.
Yeah, exactly. But the point is, they are diversified across the board, right? They compete with Netflix.
Look,
they compete with.
Yes,
that's.
Everybody has put forward this exact same argument about every industry that has dominated since the beginning of industries.
Name another company that's done something.
The railroad industry, the steel industry, the coal industry.
The railroad industry. The railroad industry was the delivery industry of Amazon. What about diversifying? Where did they diversify? What did they make? Highways? Did they make it so you could travel anywhere? Did they say, you know what, we're going to buy up, the telephone company as well? No, man. They were the railroad industry. Yes, they were possibly monopolizing in that industry.
No, not possibly. They were.
They were not monopolizing cross-industry like Amazon is doing. And
I believe they were. So
don't take this as me saying Amazon needs to be split up. That's a whole other conversation. My whole point is, it's not so far to stretch to say that a majority of jobs available are going to be controlled by a very small number of people in the future, right? That is the path we're moving on. Just as an example, 5 companies make up 25. Okay, you know what? I don't want to give the statistic.
5 conglomerations.
Because I don't remember the exact numbers. I want to say it's 5 companies make up. Yeah, I better not say it because I forget. I'll look it up while you guys close, and I'll say it if I can. But it's an increasingly large percentage of our economy and of the market that we're seeing taken up by very, very few companies, and that is trending to the in my opinion, the negative side, where you're having fewer and fewer companies dominate. As some of the comments that we've had in chat while we had these talks were saying. I think somebody said like 97% of employers are small business or something, but that doesn't give you a clear picture, because all of those employers could employ one person, whereas one company could employ everybody, and that stat could still be true. Not that it is, but the point being, you have to be careful on how you look at a stat. So,
mark my words, I will make you a $1 bet right now, and I expect it to be paid out with whatever the inflation makes it at the time. Amazon will be supplanted by the next company that does it better. That is always the case.
No, I disagree.
It isn't the case.
I feel Amazon
always been the case.
It has not always been the case. What happens
Amazon supplanted the company that did it best before them.
Who did it better before Amazon?
I don't know, IBM.
And something I agree with and most of the left agrees with is that I would agree with you under normal circumstances, but 2020, 21st century going forward,
what is different about these circumstances?
The amount of wealth accumulation that's occurred with these companies, the amount of power that's occurred within these companies. This is not
power. We got to get into that. We have to have a podcast on that. That's the one we tried to have, but I totally messed up by talking American Dream.
No, it's scary, dude, because like these companies essentially are going to continue to grow at an exponential rate to the point that competition is viable. I don't see a company competing against Amazon. Look at the .com burst, right? Look at the .com burst. The second, once Google and Microsoft and I don't know, freaking Firefox, like who uses Firefox? Once we're left down to like 2 or 3 browsers, major innovations on the browser stop happening. And when there's been no new browser war. The browser wars ended in the 90s, and for 20 plus years now, the reality is our web browsers haven't changed much. Now you can argue maybe they're perfect, but what the point is that there comes a time right now where some companies like Microsoft, Google, Amazon have so much power. There's gonna be a point that
so like listen, man, I understand your point, but and I'll let you finish, but even that point that you just chose right there is just it's incorrect. I've seen the data. I've seen one of those really cool charts where it was like it did a pie chart, and this was the share of each one, and then you see like one browser go all the way to most of the share, and then it goes back down as something else takes over, and then something else takes over, and this happened all the way up until today. Like everything constantly changes. If you make something better, it will supplant the thing before it.
No, what happens when you don't have anti-monopoly laws and stuff is you make something better, and then the company. We do, but they aren't enforced to the extent that they were previously. You make something better, and the larger company comes in and buys it up and squashes it.
Yeah, so you made the American dream right there. You just got $1 million for your $1 million idea. Capitalism.
Or you got $1 million for your $10 billion idea. And not to say that you don't I'm not saying like, hey, you deserve $10 billion. I'm saying like it gets squashed because you're not in an opportunity to be able to turn that down because you never could have succeeded anyway. I can't find this exact number, and hopefully next time I will. I think it's something along the lines of the top 5% or the top 5 companies in the U.S. make up like 25% of the GDP, something like that.
Yeah,
like 5 companies make up 1/4 of our GDP.
Cool.
And so that statement is to the point of saying like the opportunity to go and do something else and be extremely successful is being reduced because these 5 people now that have control of these companies have control of 1/4 of all of the wealth in this country and who gets hired, who gets paid, how that happens, and all of that, right?
Right. We can drill in on that more maybe next time or some other time. But anything else you want to say, Chris? I pretty much spoke my mind.
My mind's out there. My mind's out.
I think we're all pretty clear on where we all stand on that. So, I mean, with that, we're 13-ish minutes over. We did start, I think, 7 minutes late, so we're only like 6 minutes over or whatever. But thanks everybody for coming out tonight. I had a great conversation, guys.
This was good, guys.
Yeah.
I still don't know what we talked about.
Yeah, for that last part there. All right. Good night, everybody. Thanks for watching. Please like and subscribe if that's your thing. Share it if you thought it was useful. And we'll see you next time.
Absolutely.